Welcome to Crushed Husband. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. I always woke up early. Habit from the service, I guess. Even after 20 years of retirement, my body still ran on military time. I'd usually spend the quiet hours sipping coffee on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the cornfield out back, maybe thinking about Clara. She'd passed 6 years ago, but I still set her coffee cup out every morning. It made me feel like she was still here. My name's Nathan Holberg. I'm 77 years old, live just outside Sterling, Illinois, in the same creaky farmhouse I bought with Clara 50 years ago. It's not fancy, but it's mine. And until that morning, it was peaceful. I just sat down at the kitchen table when I heard tires on the gravel. That was strange. Nobody came out here unannounced. I figured maybe it was the mailman or some neighbor with a busted fence. But when I looked out the window, I nearly dropped my coffee. It was Damien, my son. I hadn't seen him in, 4 years? Maybe 5. And he wasn't alone. His SUV was crammed with people and bags. His wife Sienna climbed out first, barking orders at their 2 boys like a drill sergeant. Damien Jr. was maybe 15 now, slouched over with headphones on, staring at his phone. The younger one, Evan, was dragging a suitcase that looked heavier than him. And there Damien was, trying to pop the trunk while balancing a tray of coffees. I opened the door. "What the hell is this?" Damien looked up, flashed that sheepish grin I'd seen too many times. "Hey, Dad, surprise." "Surprise is one word for it," I muttered. Sienna gave me a once-over like she was evaluating a used couch. "Hi, Nathan. Sorry to barge in. We didn't want to wake you by calling early." She said it like this was all pre-arranged, like I'd rolled out a damn red carpet. Damien stepped forward. "Listen, the house is getting fumigated. Termites. We gotta be out for a few weeks." I frowned. "Termites?" "Yeah, we talked about it at Christmas," he said quickly. I hadn't seen them at Christmas. Sienna breezed past me into the house. "I hope it's okay we brought our things in. The boys need a place to set up for school. Damien said you'd understand." I stood there, dumbfounded, while the boys lugged in bag after bag, 6 suitcases. 6, like they were moving to Europe. "I'll take the guest room," I said firmly, trying to re-establish some ground. "Oh, actually," Sienna turned back to me, already halfway up the stairs. "The boys are sharing the guest room. We'll need your bedroom, only room with a king bed and attached bath." I blinked. "That's Clara's room." Sienna didn't pause. "It's the most practical option." And just like that, I was shoved into the small back guest room that still smelled faintly of mothballs. My own bed, Clara's bed, was being taken over by a woman who once told Clara's cornbread was too rustic. By mid-afternoon, Sienna was cleaning out the fridge. "You really shouldn't eat expired food," she said, holding up my Tupperware and dumping it in the trash. "And all this red meat, not good for a man your age." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. As I watched her unload almond milk and tofu into my refrigerator, something clicked. This wasn't temporary, not in their minds. They weren't visiting, they were settling in. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't about termites. The first thing to go was the doormat. It used to say, "Welcome home," in faded blue script. Clara had picked it out from the little hardware store in town. She thought it was folksy. Now it was replaced with a slick black thing that just said, "Hello." No warmth, no charm, just hello. Like the house itself didn't even recognize me anymore. Sienna said it was aesthetic. That word became her favorite weapon over the next week. In the living room, my recliner vanished. The same recliner Clara bought me after my second knee surgery. I found it shoved into the sunroom, with a crocheted blanket tossed over it like a shroud. "Too bulky," Sienna said, waving a hand. "We're going for a clean look. Scandinavian rustic with a minimalist twist." I had no idea what the hell that meant. My leather-bound Bible, the wooden clock from Clara's father, the stained glass cross we bought in Branson, they all disappeared one by one, without a word. Every time I asked where something went, Sienna gave the same chirpy answer. "Oh, it's in storage. Don't worry, Nathan. We're just refreshing things a little." Refreshing. Like my whole life was an old shelf that needed dusting. One morning, I caught Damien sneaking out of my old office. I still called it that in my head, my office, though it was now unrecognizable. My bookshelves were bare, the curtains had been replaced with blackout blinds, and the sturdy old desk was nowhere in sight. "What's going on in here?" I asked. Damien scratched his neck, avoiding eye contact. The boys need a space. Somewhere to unwind, do homework, that kind of thing. I looked around. There was a beanbag chair in the corner, a giant flat screen already mounted on the wall, and an empty energy drink can on the floor. Homework, I said. Damien gave me a sheepish grin. And decompress. The next evening, I came into the living room and found Sienna and the boys watching some reality show. I reached for the remote on instinct. "Do you mind, Nathan?" Sienna said sweetly. "The boys are right in the middle of this." "It's Tuesday," I said. "I watch the Cubs game on Tuesdays." Damien Jr. didn't even look up. "Can't you watch it in your room or something?" I stood there for a second, holding my tongue, feeling heat climb up the back of my neck. Then I turned and walked out without another word. The guest room, the one they'd shoved me into, smelled like dust and forgotten winters. The mattress dipped in the middle. There was no TV, no place to sit, and the only window looked out at the back of the barn. A few days later, I went to the garage to grab a wrench and stumbled over a stack of boxes I didn't recognize. I opened one, Clara's photo albums. I tore through the next box. Jazz records, our wedding photos, a framed letter I'd gotten from my old commander, all packed away like junk, like garbage. I stood there in the half-light of the garage, holding Clara's smile in my hands, and something inside me cracked open, not like a fire, more like a slow leak of something old and bitter, something I'd been swallowing for too long. I heard the boys laughing inside, Sienna yelling at them to put away their screens, Damien pacing on the porch, still taking business calls like a man too busy to notice the wreckage he had left behind. None of them saw me, not really. I was just a ghost in their vacation home, a soft old man in the way of whatever life they were trying to build for themselves here. And as I stood there with my memories shoved in cardboard, I realized something I hadn't let myself say out loud until then. They didn't plan on leaving, not anytime soon, maybe not ever. It was sometime past midnight when I heard the knock. Software. Hesitant. Not Damien's thud or Sienna's impatient rap. This was different. I sat up slowly, blinking into the dark guest room, heart already ticking faster. Another knock, barely louder than a whisper. "Grandpa?" "Fiona." I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. "Come in, sweetheart." The door creaked open and she slipped inside, arms crossed tight over her sweatshirt. Her long brown hair was pulled into a messy braid, and she looked older than 15 all of a sudden. Older and worried. "I didn't wake you, did I?" "I was just thinking," I said. "That's about all I do in here." She managed a faint smile and eased onto the edge of the bed. We sat in silence for a moment, the way people do when they know something serious is about to be said. Then she glanced at the door, lowered her voice, and said, "I need to tell you something, but you can't tell them it came from me." My throat tightened. "All right." "I heard Mom on the phone with Grandma earlier. Her mom, I mean." I nodded. "Go on." "She was talking about how they've already put money down for the moving truck, for her parents, to come live here, like, permanently." I stared at her, my hands curled into fists on my knees. Fiona swallowed hard. "She said the back bedroom would be fine for them once you're gone. I think she meant the guest room you're in now. And, Grandpa," she looked down, her voice wavered. "They're not waiting for you to leave on your own." She pulled something from the front pocket of her hoodie, a folded-up brochure. I took it from her with trembling fingers. Silver Oaks, a community for retired heroes. The front showed a smiling elderly man on a golf cart, looking like a stock photo version of me. Inside were phrases like patriotic living, assisted independence, and secure memory care wing. Mom said they already put down a deposit. Dad was on the call too. I think they've been planning it for a while. I kept reading. Small text, big promises. No mention of how far it was, nearly 3 hours from here. No mention of how I'd be paying for it either. "They called it a transition," Fiona whispered. "She said it was better to just do it before you got stubborn." A cold ache spread across my chest. I looked over at the girl beside me, my granddaughter, and for a second I saw Clara's face in hers. "They're going to tell you tonight," she said. "After dinner, there's a whole family meeting planned. Damien said he already talked to a lawyer about next steps in case you don't agree." My mouth went dry. "And Grandpa..." Fiona blinked fast, like she was trying not to cry. "I think they're going to try to say you're not, like, mentally stable. Like maybe you're too forgetful or not safe here by yourself." I let out a slow breath, steadying myself. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. She looked at me then. Really looked at me. "Because I know none of that's true." I nodded, reached over, and placed my hand gently over hers. "Thank you?" And as she stood to leave, she paused in the doorway and whispered, "Don't let them do this to you." I sat there for a long time after she left, still, silent. But in my mind, something started moving. A plan. A quiet, careful counterattack. Because if they were going to come at me with lawyers and brochures and lies, they'd better be ready for a war. Dinner was baked ziti, overcooked and watery. Sienna served it like she was hosting a talk show. Overly cheerful, fake smiling, topping plates with too much grated cheese before anyone asked. The boys were already in the living room, faces glued to the TV, volume loud enough to rattle the cabinet doors. Fiona sat beside me, unusually quiet, her fork untouched. She gave me a small nod when Damien cleared his throat. "Dad," he started, "can we talk for a sec before dessert?" I set my fork down slowly. Sienna chimed in, folding her hands like a kindergarten teacher. "This is just a little family discussion. No need to get nervous." Damien shifted in his seat. "We've been thinking about what's best for you going forward. The house, the upkeep. It's a lot for one person, especially at your age." I raised an eyebrow. "I've managed fine for the past 6 years." "Sure," Sienna said quickly, "but it's about safety now. We've seen you get forgetful lately." My jaw clenched. "You left the stove on twice last month," Damien added. "And you fell in the garden, remember?" I stared at him. "I tripped over a damn rake." Sienna leaned in, soft voiced like I was some delicate porcelain teacup. "We love you, Nathan. That's why we've been researching options. Beautiful options. Supportive, dignified." She reached into a folder on the table and slid a brochure toward me. Silver Oaks. A luxury village for aging patriots. Fiona's eyes flicked to me, then back to her plate. "There's a shuttle service," Sienna continued. "Game nights, a veterans club, and it's got the highest-rated memory care program in the county." "I don't need memory care," I said flatly. Damien sighed. "Dad, this isn't a debate. We already paid the deposit." I picked up the brochure, held it between my thumb and forefinger like it might stain. 3 hours from here," I said, reading the fine print. Sienna kept her smile plastered on. Just far enough for privacy, but close enough for visits. I looked at Damien. So this was the plan all along. He flinched but didn't deny it. I set the brochure down. "You gonna have me declared incompetent too? Get the courts involved?" Damien looked uncomfortable. Sienna didn't blink. "We've started the paperwork, yes," she said. "A wellness evaluation will happen next week. Just routine, nothing personal." Fiona dropped her fork with a clatter. No one noticed but me. I nodded slowly, pretending to absorb it all. "And what happens to the house?" Sienna brightened. "We'd stay here, of course. The boys love it. It's good for them to be in the country. And my parents, well, they'll move in once things are settled." "Right," I said quietly. "Once I'm out of the picture." They both froze for a second, then Sienna softened her voice again. "Don't think of it that way, Nathan. You deserve peace, security, a community." I stood up, steady and calm. "Well," I said, "I'll think about it." Sienna beamed. "Really?" I nodded. "If you say it's what's best, who am I to argue?" And then I went back to the guest room, shut the door gently behind me, and locked it. Because they thought they'd won. But the war wasn't over yet. It hadn't even started. They dropped me off like a forgotten suitcase. No hug, no goodbye. Just Damien muttering something about paperwork and Sienna reminding the front desk to keep him off ladders and sugar. Then they left, their SUV vanishing down the tree-lined drive before I'd even finished signing the intake forms. Silver Oaks smelled like lemon disinfectant and boiled peas. A young nurse with tired eyes handed me a folder labeled "Welcome Packet" and guided me to a common area that had the charm of an airport lounge. "This is temporary," I told myself. "You're not dying here." After dinner, which tasted like wet cardboard, I wandered out to the courtyard to sit alone. That's when I saw him. "Halberg," a gravelly voice called. I turned. "George Latimer," he said, extending a hand. "3rd Infantry. We ran recon through the same stinkhole in Nam, different platoons." I stood up, shook his hand. "I'll be damned," he grinned. "Heard your name through the nurse's log." Thought I'd say hello before they start pumping us full of oatmeal and sedatives. We sat down at a bench near the fountain, which burbled loudly enough to drown out the elevator music spilling from the rec room. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. Didn't expect to find someone like you here, George said. I shrugged. Didn't expect to be here either. He leaned in slightly. You got railroaded, didn't you? I didn't answer. I've seen it, he went on. Kids think they know better. They start moving pieces before the old man knows there's a game on the board. I looked at him. They said it was for my own good. He snorted. So did mine. That's how I lost my condo in Naples. We sat quietly after that, watching the sun sink behind the trees. Then he said, You still own your place? I nodded. Deed's in my name, has been since Clara passed. George whistled low. That's your ammo, brother. I turned toward him. What do you mean? You're not trapped, he said. You've still got leverage. Property's power. I frowned. Doesn't matter. They'll just drag me back to court and say I'm losing it. George shook his head. Not if you get ahead of them. That night, he introduced me to his niece, Mara. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who looked like she hadn't slept properly in years, but she listened, really listened. I specialize in estate law, she said, notebook already out. You've still got the legal reins, Mr. Halberg, and if they try to strip you of that through a medical proxy or a guardianship order, we can counter. I told her everything, about Damien and Sienna, the house, the sudden fumigation lie, the brochures, even Fiona's warning. I didn't hold anything back. After a long pause, Mara closed her notebook. Okay, she said, here's what we're going to do. Over the next few days, Mara worked quietly. Discrete title reviews, power of attorney checks, property valuation. George handled cover for me, told the nurses I needed nature breaks, and signed me out for long walks, which were actually meetings in the back of Mara's Subaru at a nearby gas station. Then, one morning, she showed up with a smile. I found a buyer, she said, a conservationist named Heath. He's been looking for a quiet piece of land in Illinois to retire on. He likes older properties, wants something simple. I was skeptical. Will he agree to let me stay? I already brought it up. Not only is he fine with it, he likes the idea. Said he'd rather live alongside someone with history than buy from a developer. I leaned back on the bench, heart thumping harder than it had in weeks. George nudged me. Told you, property's power. And just like that, the war had a battle plan. And I had an army. It started with nature excursions. George came up with the term after a nurse caught us sneaking out the second time. I'd sign out at the front desk under the guise of taking long therapeutic walks, and George would drive us straight to the farmhouse. Mara would be waiting with Heath, the potential buyer, clipboard in hand, and a practice smile ready. Doesn't get more natural than 80 acres of corn, George had joked, as we pulled into the gravel drive the first time. It was strange seeing my own house from the outside like that, like it already belonged to someone else. But as soon as I stepped out of the car and smelled the earth, the grass, the hint of Clara's peonies still hanging on in the flower bed, I remembered why we were doing this. Sienna's SUV was gone, which meant the house was clear. Mara didn't want to risk any confrontations. She had scheduled the viewings like covert ops, 20-minute windows, minimal footprint, leave no trace. Heath was a quiet man, early 60s. Wore flannel and jeans with the kind of ease that told me he actually worked with his hands. Not like Damien in his golf shirts. I'm not looking for a fresh start, Heath had said on the second visit. I'm looking for a peaceful finish. He walked the perimeter of the property with a reverence I hadn't seen in anyone else who toured the place. Where other buyers complained about outdated fixtures or asked if the barn could be torn down, Heath leaned on the fence and said, "You can hear the land breathe out here." Not everyone was so gracious. One woman spent the entire tour asking if I could be relocated sooner. Another man, some city developer with shiny shoes, asked if the farmhouse had demolition potential. "No, sir," I told him, deadpan. "But you do." Heath never once asked when I'd be leaving. In fact, it was the opposite. "I read the clause," he said, referring to the agreement Mara had drafted. "You stay on the land. Guest house, main house, doesn't matter. You've earned that." He paused before adding, "Place doesn't feel right without someone like you on it." That's when I knew he was the one. It took 2 more weeks of inspections, paperwork, signatures, and carefully timed phone calls made from behind the rose trellis outside the facility's dining room. But we got there. The offer came through above, asking. Heath didn't blink. Mara had drawn up the contract with an iron spine. The buyer retained ownership, but the seller, me, retained permanent residence rights in a custom-built cottage on the west edge of the property, just past the old oak tree Clara used to read under. I signed it on a Tuesday. "Congratulations," Mara said, shaking my hand. George grinned wide. "Looks like you bought yourself some freedom, soldier." We all sat in the car for a moment after, just letting the silence settle in. Back at Silver Oaks, the nurse raised an eyebrow when I returned. "Good walk today?" I smiled. "Best one yet." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, knowing that my house was still mine. Not by ownership anymore, but by presence, by memory, by choice. I would no longer be shoved aside in a room that didn't belong to me. I would no longer be the burden they could quietly ship away. They had tried to erase me, but they forgot one thing. I still held the pen. And I had just rewritten the ending. They really went all out for Sienna's father. I could see the white rental tent from halfway down the county road, balloons bobbing in the breeze, folding chairs lined up in the yard, a stack of catered aluminum trays steaming near the porch. Someone had even parked a valet sign at the end of the gravel drive, like this was a country club. I hadn't been back to the house since the sale closed, but today wasn't about visiting. Today was about delivering. I adjusted the cuffs of my cleanest shirt, took one long breath, and nodded to Mara in the front seat. Heath sat quietly in the back, holding the envelope. "You ready?" Mara asked. "As I'll ever be," I said. We pulled up right behind a stretch limo that looked completely out of place next to my barn. Damien was outside in a navy sport coat, directing guests toward the buffet. Sienna stood under the tent, laughing too loudly, holding a glass of something bubbly. Her father sat in a lawn chair like royalty, surrounded by his grandkids. As I stepped out of the car, heads started to turn. Damien did a double take. Sienna stopped mid-laugh. "Nathan," she called, brows knitting. "What are you—" "Afternoon," I said, walking toward the tent. Lovely weather for a party. I could feel every eye tracking me as I moved through the crowd. I hadn't been invited, but no one stopped me. Not with the way I walked, not with the look on my face. Heath followed a few steps behind, quiet as ever. Mara had the documents tucked neatly in her leather folder. "Is this about the medication refill?" Sienna asked quickly, stepping forward. "Because I told Damien to—" "No," I said. "This is about the property." Damien blinked. "What?" I turned to Mara, who pulled out the papers and handed them to Sienna. "What is this?" Sienna asked, flipping through. "The deed transfer," Mara said, professionally calm. "As of last week, this land, including the farmhouse, barns, and all structures, is legally owned by Mr. Heath Franklin." Gasps broke out around us. Sienna's face went pale. "You're joking!" Mara shook her head. "Fully executed, witnessed, filed, recorded. Everything's in order." Damien snatched the papers. "This can't be real." "It is," I said. "You know, for folks so concerned about my mental state, you really underestimated how much I could still handle." Sienna's mouth opened and closed. You sold it? Without telling us?" "You mean like how you planned to have me committed without telling me?" I asked. Damien stepped forward, voice rising. "You had no right." I looked him dead in the eye. "I had every right. I was still the owner. You were just squatting." Sienna tried to smile through the panic. "Well, maybe we can talk to Mr. Franklin and work something out." "You won't have time," I interrupted. "You have 30 days to vacate." I handed her the formal notice myself. Sienna's father stood up then, wobbly on his feet. "What's all this about?" "Change of plans," I said. "You won't be moving in after all." Damien crumpled the paper in his fist. "This is low." I smiled. "Not as low as putting your father in a home behind his back, but close." Fiona appeared near the tent entrance. She didn't say anything, just watched, a small grin tugging at her mouth. Sienna's voice cracked. "You're seriously doing this? Right now? At a birthday party?" I took a deep breath and let it out slow. Seemed like the right setting. After all, it's a celebration. And then I turned and walked out, past the folding chairs, past the stunned guests, past the tent they pitched on my land. This time, I didn't look back. They had their party. Now they had their notice. The waterfront apartment wasn't anything special. 2 bedrooms, plain carpet, a balcony with flaking railings, but it had a view of the river and nobody telling me when to eat or where to sleep. That alone made it paradise. I moved in the week after the notice was served. I didn't stick around to see Damien and Sienna pack up their things. Mara handled the final handover. She called to tell me they left 2 days before the deadline. No note, no apology, just a trash bag full of broken coat hangers in the garage. Fine by me. I used part of the down payment to furnish the apartment. A real coffee maker. A proper armchair. I picked up a couple of houseplants, even though I wasn't sure I'd keep them alive. Still, the green felt good, fresh. Fiona came by on the third evening, holding a bag of takeout and a small tin of Clara's old sugar cookies she'd found in the back of a cabinet. "Thought you might want these," she said, setting the tin on the counter. "They expired 3 years ago, but they still smell like her." I opened the lid and felt my throat tighten. They do. She hung around for hours that night, sitting cross-legged on the couch, telling me stories about school and asking if the guest house was going to have a hammock. "You think I'm too old for a hammock?" I asked. "You're literally never too old for a hammock," she said, rolling her eyes. I told her about George, about Heath, about how we pulled it all off. She listened without interrupting, then said, "I should have done more." "You did enough," I said quietly. "You told the truth when it counted." Later that week, I signed up for a continuing education course through the community center, Introduction to Landscape Photography. I figured it was time I learned how to capture all those sunrises I'd been watching for years without knowing how to keep them. The first class was small, 6 students and 1 instructor named Lillian. She was a retired poetry teacher with silver hair, soft hands, and a sharp sense of humor. She caught me squinting at my old digital camera and came over to show me how to adjust the ISO. "You're not as bad at this as you think," she said. "You just don't trust your eye yet." We struck up a friendship, slow and steady. I found myself looking forward to Tuesdays. We talked about books. She lent me a copy of Leaves of Grass and laughed when I said I didn't read anything that didn't come with a bullet point. I wasn't looking for anything more, but there was something comforting about the quiet, the familiarity. Like we both knew how to move slowly, without expectation. And for the first time in years, I felt unburdened. I wasn't fighting anyone. I wasn't defending my life. I was just living it. The guest house was almost finished now. Heath sent me updates every Friday. A porch beam here, a new window there. Mara said I could move in by early spring. Until then, I had my porch, my coffee, my plants, and for the first time in a long time, I had peace. Not the kind you find when everyone leaves you alone. The kind you build, one honest day at a time. It was early spring when I moved back. The guest house sat about 100 yards west of the main farmhouse, tucked into the slope of the land just past the oak tree Clara used to read under. It was modern but modest. 1 story, wide porch, light wood, lots of windows. The front faced east, just like Clara always said a house should. "Start your day with the sun," she'd tell me every time we saw a new place. Heath handed me the keys in person. No fuss, no speeches. Just a firm shake of the hand and a pat on the shoulder. "It's yours now," he said, "as long as you want it." Heath had taken over the main house. True to his word, he kept things simple. He'd fixed the fence, cleared out the garbage Damien and Sienna left behind, and even rebuilt the old chicken coop. Not for chickens, he'd told me, for peace of mind. The housewarming wasn't big, but it was just right. George came, wearing his best flannel and bringing a bottle of wine. I'm pretty sure he stole from the community lounge back at Silver Oaks. Mara showed up in jeans and a baseball cap, hugging me so hard she nearly knocked the wind out of me. Heath grilled burgers. Fiona made a chocolate cake from scratch. Said it was Clara's recipe, but improved with espresso and sea salt. The guest list was small. My people. My real people. We ate outside on the porch. The breeze was light. The kind that makes the tall grass ripple like water. The sky had that soft, late afternoon glow to it. "I can't believe how fast they finished this place," George said, looking around. "You'd be amazed what happens when you work with people who respect deadlines," I said. Fiona laughed into her drink. "Or just respect people, period." There were no speeches, no awkward toasts. But at one point, Heath stood up and raised his glass without saying a word. We all followed, and in that moment, I felt it. Not victory, not pride, just peace. Later that evening, when the guests had left and the porch lights flickered on, I sat in my chair and looked out across the land. The fields were still bare, not quite ready for planting, but the soil was there, waiting, patient. A few minutes later, I heard footsteps behind me. "Mind if I join you?" Lillian asked, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Not one bit," I said. She took the seat beside me, setting 1 mug gently on the table between us. "It's quiet out here," she said. "Exactly how I like it." We sat in silence for a while, watching the mist start to rise over the fields. A few deer moved along the far edge of the property. The farmhouse lights glowed soft and warm in the distance. "I used to think home was the house," I said quietly. "The walls, the roof, the pictures on the mantel. But it's not." She looked over at me. "No? It's this. The air, the quiet, the choice. I didn't need Clara's chair to feel her. I didn't need the old photos to remember who I was. This land had held us both once, and now it held me, fully, freely, on my own terms." Lillian smiled gently. "So this is it then?" "This," I said, "is exactly enough." And as the sun broke gently over the fields Clara loved, I sat in my chair, tea in hand, beside someone who knew not to fill the silence with noise. Just 2 people, breathing in the peace we built. Home, at last.